They say silence is golden. But in love, silence can be a weapon. Many people believe that if someone pulls away, the only way to bridge the gap is to chase, to explain, to fight the silence with more words, louder, faster, more desperate. But real connection is never built by overfunctioning for someone who's emotionally underperforming. My decades of research on couples, I've seen a paradox again and again. The more you try to fix the silence, the more you disappear inside it. You give more, you plead more, you justify your feelings. And yet the farther they drift. Why? Because what you think is love is often fear in disguise, fear of rejection, fear of being invisible, fear of not being enough unless you're doing something. But here's the truth. Chasing someone who ignores you doesn't prove your love. It proves you've abandoned yourself. The real question is, who are you when you stop performing for their attention? There's an emotional turning point that happens when you stop trying to make someone see you and instead begin to see yourself clearly. That's not ego, that's emotional maturity. It's the moment you stop negotiating with silence and start honoring your worth. You don't destroy a man's ego by yelling louder. You destroy it by making peace with your own presence, so loud, so rooted that his absence becomes deafening. The loudest response to being ignored is silence that loves itself. When someone you care about begins to ignore you, it doesn't just hurt, it disorients you. You find yourself checking your phone, rereading messages, rehearsing what you said, wondering what you did wrong. But here's the first aha insight I want you to take in. Being ignored often has less to do with your worth and more to do with the other person's inability to manage emotional intimacy. This is what we call emotional flooding in the Gottman framework. When someone, especially a man raised to suppress emotional vulnerability, feels overwhelmed by conflict, expectations, or closeness, they don't always lash out. Sometimes they go silent, they detach, they check out, but not always maliciously. Often they don't know how to regulate what's happening inside them, so they shut down outside of them. Now here's the paradox. When you feel that detachment, your nervous system interprets it as abandonment. So instinctively you go into overdrive. You make a bid for connection, a text, a question, a plea, even sarcasm. And when that bid is ignored, you try harder. You over-explain, over-give, overanalyze. That effort, though rooted in love, often begins to look like emotional chasing. And emotional chasing doesn't bring people closer. It pushes them further away. Why? Because when one partner is flooded and the other is pursuing, both people feel unsafe in the relationship. Here's the second aha insight. Love thrives in presence, but dignity thrives in boundaries. When a man ignores you, the most powerful and emotionally intelligent response isn't to collapse or overcompensate, it's to pause. Not to punish him with your own silence, but to self-soothe long enough to reconnect with your clarity, to regulate your emotions so they don't spiral into self-abandonment. When you act with conscious detachment, not coldness, but groundedness, you interrupt the toxic pattern that says, if I chase him enough, he'll finally see me. That's not love. That's emotional bargaining. And it teaches your nervous system that connection only comes at the cost of self-betrayal. This is where the concept of love maps becomes essential. A love map is the inner blueprint we build of each other's world, values, fears, needs, history. But when someone ignores you, they're not updating their love map. They're disengaging from it. The more you perform for their attention, the more you erase your own map, your needs, your voice, your boundaries. So what do? Let's walk through one loop. behavior. You feel ignored, so you text 3 times in a row. Insight, your anxiety is making a bid for connection, but his silence is a bid for space. Healing. You breathe, regulate your body, and say to yourself, I can hold my feelings without making them his responsibility. You don't send the fourth text. You go inward. You journal, walk, sleep, pray, not as a performance, but as a return to your own emotional center. That is how you destroy ego without destroying yourself. The ego, his or yours, thrives in control, but love thrives in choice. When you respond with emotional clarity instead of reactivity, you become someone whose presence demands awareness, not by force, by energy. Here's one powerful reframe. Instead of seeing his silence as rejection, try this. His detachment reveals his emotional limitations. My response reveals my emotional maturity. And that maturity isn't loud, it doesn't yell, cling, or perform. It's quiet, rooted, unshakable, the kind of calm that turns your dignity into a mirror, not to shame him, but to reflect his absence so clearly he can no longer hide from it. This isn't about playing games, it's about healing your patterns. Because love, real love, cannot be built on emotional chasing. It is built on mutual regulation, mutual presence, and the courage to sit in silence, not as punishment, but as proof that your inner world is whole, with or without his noise. Her name was Maya. She wasn't dramatic, needy, or insecure, just someone who loved deeply, sometimes too much for her own good. In the beginning, he was attentive, the kind of man who listened with his eyes. He knew her coffee order, the way she avoided conflict, how she laughed when she was nervous. But over time, something shifted. The texts slowed, the calls shortened. She found herself staring at her screen more than she spoke into it. It started subtly. A read receipt with no reply. A vague, been busy when she asked about the weekend, and then nothing. No calls, no check-ins, just air. Maya told herself he was just stressed, that relationships go through lulls, that maybe if she just explained herself better, if she gave him room, if she made him feel safe, he'd come back. So she wrote him long messages, carefully worded, gentle but urgent. She asked if he was okay, if they were okay. She scrolled through their old photos, trying to find proof that she wasn't imagining things. Her friends told her to stop, but she couldn't. Because love, when it feels like it's slipping through your hands, makes you grasp tighter. One night, she waited by the phone. After pressing send, her message was kind, again, asking if he wanted to talk. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then silence. She stared at the screen for what felt like hours, but was probably 3 minutes. She felt her throat tighten. Her thumb hovered over another draft she had written earlier, one last attempt to make him see her. But something in her paused. Not dramatically, just paused. And then she did something different. She deleted the message. She locked her phone and placed it face down. She exhaled, the kind of breath that had been stuck for weeks. And in that stillness, a whisper surfaced inside her, quieter than a thought, but louder than all her chasing. You're not meant to audition for love you already gave. She got up, she washed the dishes slowly, she lit a candle, she cried, not because she lost him, but because she had abandoned herself chasing someone who had already left without saying goodbye. And in that quiet, she saw herself in the mirror. Not the woman who'd been waiting, but the one who was done. Not out of anger, but out of return. Return to self. Return to truth. Return to peace. That night, he didn't text, but she slept. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't wake up anxious. She didn't get him back, but she got herself back. Sometimes the most powerful thing you'll ever say is nothing at all. When someone you care about begins to ignore you, the emotional response can feel overwhelming, like being stranded in a conversation that never ended. In those moments, your nervous system is looking for safety, for clarity, for anything to make the confusion make sense. But the key to power in relationships, especially when someone detaches, isn't in proving your worth louder. It's in returning to yourself more deeply. Here are a few tools that will help you move out of emotional chasing and back into clarity, dignity, and emotional self-leadership. When you feel the urge to text, call, explain, or confront, stop just for 1 minute. Set a timer. In those 60 seconds, breathe deeply. Name what's happening in your body. My chest is tight. I feel heat in my throat. My hands are restless. This tiny pause interrupts the cycle of reactivity. Gottman's research has shown that when couples take even short breaks during conflict, what he calls self-soothing, their conversations become more constructive and less defensive. The same applies here. The pause isn't silence for silence's sake. It's a sacred interruption, a way of saying, I deserve to respond from my center, not from my wound. Second, try this tonight. The 3-1 internal repair method. Here's how it works. The next time you feel triggered by his silence, whether it's a missed text or a vague, sorry, been busy, notice the emotional impact. Then for every one negative interpretation your mind makes, he doesn't care, I'm not enough, I must have done something wrong, offer yourself 3 self-validating truths. It's okay that I want connection. I showed up with honesty and kindness. I don't have to shrink to earn love. This method is based on the 5-1 ratio from Gottman's research, the ideal ratio of positive to negative interactions in healthy relationships. When adapted inward, it becomes a form of emotional repair that prevents self-abandonment. Because the real danger in being ignored isn't just that someone turns away, it's that we start turning against ourselves. Third, give yourself this journal prompt, one that feels sacred. What did I give today that I didn't receive in return? This isn't about keeping score. It's about restoring balance. We often don't realize how much emotional labor we expend trying to hold connection when the other person has let go. This prompt brings you back into contact with the reality of your own giving and whether that giving is being honored. As you write, resist the urge to justify his silence. Just tell the truth. Quietly, gently. Truth is the foundation of peace. Not the kind of peace that makes everything okay, but the kind that makes you okay, even when things aren't. Finally, a tool rooted in emotional awareness, name it to tame it. This phrase, coined by neuropsychiatrist Dr. Dan Siegel and supported by emotion regulation research that aligns closely with Gottman's work, is simple but powerful. When you feel hurt, disappointed, or anxious, name the emotion. I feel rejected. I feel invisible. I feel unworthy. The act of labeling the emotion activates the prefrontal cortex and begins to downregulate the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fight or flight responses. In other words, naming your feelings doesn't make you weaker, it makes you wiser. Each of these tools help shift your focus from him, his silence, his ego, his avoidance, back to you, your breath, your dignity, your story. Because when you stop trying to win someone back, you begin winning yourself back. And that's not ego, that's emotional intelligence. I want to speak directly to the woman who feels invisible right now, to the one who sent the message and got no response, to the one replaying the last conversation, searching for what she said wrong, to the one whose heart is screaming, why doesn't he see me? I see you, and I need you to hear this. Being ignored is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of his capacity. What you're feeling, the ache, the anxiety, the hollow ache of emotional silence, it's real, but it's not final, because this moment, this silence is not abandonment. It's an opening, a return, a chance to come home to yourself. I know it doesn't feel like that at first. You want to explain, fix it, reconnect. You want to prove you're worth choosing. But here's the breakthrough, the one that may give you goosebumps if you're ready for it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when someone pulls away is to stop running after them and turn around to face the part of you you've been ignoring, the part of you that's exhausted from trying, oh, the part of you that's been giving without receiving, the part of you that keeps asking, what did I do wrong? But here's the mirror truth I want you to hold. What if you weren't too much, just unprotected? Too open, too exposed, too willing to carry the weight of someone else's emotional absence? You don't need to harden. You don't need to play games or perform indifference. You just need to protect your peace. And you protect your peace not by closing your heart, but by closing the gap between who you are and who you've been pretending to be to keep his attention. Silence, when used wisely, is not passive aggression. It's sacred boundary. It says, I will not shrink to fit into your emotional immaturity. And here's the truth you can carry forward. I don't have to prove I'm worthy of love. I don't have to remember it. So the next time he ignores you, don't respond with more of yourself. Respond with the version of you that knows her value is not up for negotiation. You're not asking for too much. You're asking the wrong person to meet you, and that's not your failure. That's your freedom. They say silence is golden, but you've learned silence can also be a wound. Not because you need constant noise or constant validation, but because being ignored strikes at something deeper. The ache of being unseen when you've shown up with your whole heart. You once believed that if you just tried harder, explained better, loved more, he'd come closer. That love meant chasing, proving, staying open, no matter how cold it got. But now, something different. You've learned that your worth doesn't live in his response. It lives in your return to yourself, to your peace, to the woman who no longer needs to chase someone to feel chosen. The phrase still echoes, silence is golden. But now it's not the silence between texts. It's the silence within you, the kind that says, I no longer perform to be seen. I am the one who sees me now. This is your shift from seeking to knowing, from being the woman waiting to being the woman walking away with clarity. Stillness isn't silence. It's where your power begins.